The Roca family withdraws their support. And they did this because it turns out that Amber Frey came forward. So what happened was, as this case breaks, his face is all over the news, and, she's not living in a cave or something. She watches the news too, like the rest of us, and she's like, hey, there's that guy that I'm dating that told me his wife died, before she died.
2 weeks prior to her disappearance. Okay.
2 weeks early, and seems to be lying about things. So, I mean, good for her. I mean, in a way, she's kind of a hero.
We are rolling again. This is the Solvable Mysteries Podcast, episode number 29. My name is Juras, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Glenn Highcove. How are you, man? How are you feeling?
Doing okay, yeah, just, really interested to talk about this case. It's funny, we got another California disappearance / murder case. Yeah.
It seems that
here we go.
all we do is California based, but it just happens.
It's a lot of it
to be the case that there's a lot of interesting murder cases in California. So today we're going to be, covering the murder of Laci Denise Peterson, who was an American woman, and she essentially, what we actually. Us, I assume, and a lot of our audience also probably believes that her, husband actually murdered her. So, we're going to be going into this case. So, I guess, as always, I would like to ask you from, at the beginning point of the show, was this case really, really widely covered in the U.S. when it actually happened? Because for me personally, I only heard about this case when you mentioned it to me, so I don't think this one went international, but I assume it held like it held the media attention fairly strongly in the US, it seems, right?
Yeah, I mean, this was actually the one that I remember the most, like, I think, other than, I think maybe even more so than, like, the Kaylee Anthony one that we covered.
For real?
Yeah. I mean, the Kaylee Anthony one had a little bit different stuff going on because of social media, and the landscape had kind of changed by then. But yeah, I mean, this was the one I really remember. I think, like, maybe it was just because it was the California case, and it fit that pattern that sometimes been criticized, that, like, I guess Caucasian middle class women disappearing suddenly gets a lot of attention. So this is always the one that everyone points at.
Yeah, I mean,
but yeah, I mean, more so even than the one. What was it? The other Caribbean one we did the other day. What's her name?
It's either Amy Lynn Bradley, but you're probably referring to. Man, I forgot her name.
Was it Natalie Holloway?
Of course, Natalie Holloway.
That's the one. Yeah.
I was mixing it up with like Kristen Stewart. Yeah, Kristen Smart. Yeah. So it was more than. Oh, so wait, this case was more publicized than the Natalie Holloway one, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like at least locally. Okay. Once again,
I see.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it is like, we were just talking about it, but it does seem like a disproportionate amount of that stuff happens in California, and some of it might just be that,
I think it's the weather, man.
I think it's the weather. I mean, it's the population. So California, I think by itself could be a powerful nation. Just if California was separated,
no doubt, it would be something like it would be like a Poland or something, right? Even better than that, yeah. So
it's got a massive economy, and then a lot of the media is headquartered out of California and New York. So those two poles in the nation kind of determine, I guess, what the
Man,
rest of the nation cares
we
about.
need to start doing some more New York cases because like I don't know if it's just us not picking the cases or is New York not as crazy because I feel like I've not ran into like some of these East Coast murders and stuff like that. It's mostly like in the West Coast. I mean, you know.
Yeah, maybe Giuliani calmed it down. They used to have stuff like Son of Sam.
Oh
That was a
yeah.
famous one.
Oh
Yeah, there
yeah.
were some
Oh
other
yeah.
ones, but
I've heard about
but
that one.
yeah, maybe it gets lost in the shuffle of just
Maybe.
how much other stuff goes on out there. But yeah, definitely like we seem to have our like we have both the good weather and then the crazy murders and disappearances.
I feel like the weather adds to the murders, because like when the weather is nice outside, it seems like people tend to do crazier stuff, like when it's hot. I guess that would explain why, Florida for say is so crazy. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, so I think the weather is actually adds to the craziness of it all. Well, I could see how this case was so widely publicized because there was, an interesting, I guess, part to the story or like an interesting fact that really captured media's attention was the fact that Laci Peterson, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see her image right now. She was actually 8.5 months pregnant at the time of her disappearance and death. So yeah, I think that's you would probably agree with me that that's the reason why this case grabbed so much attention was that added fact of like a pregnant woman going missing in America somewhere in the California area. Like that definitely captures the attention.
Yeah, it's true, right? A baby. There's like it's implied that there's a baby that's at risk, and then on top of it, both G and Scott are I think by any reasonable measure are very attractive people. So it's like you got this really
Yeah,
young, this really young California
California couple.
couple.
Yeah,
Yeah, really really attractive. I mean, both of them, I think, and it's just being objective about it. It almost seemed like a storybook couple. Like a lot of the people around them just
right.
thought that they were this golden couple that so at first it just seems like a massive misfortune, and then there's a big mystery, like what happened to her, and then
Yeah.
as the months go by, right, then it becomes something a lot more sinister.
Right. So let's take this from the top. Right. Let's start at the beginning. I guess. Do you have like some sort of a? Could you like give us a quick, like a breakdown of what her early life was and how she grew up and that sort of thing, because I want to get everything in this case. I want to cover every detail. Right. So we should start at the beginning.
Yeah, so Laci came from a family that I guess initially came from kind of a rural background, and in fact a lot of the story is based around, let's call it, Central California,
Mm-hmm.
which has traditionally been a very agriculture centered area. So when people think of California, often they're thinking about Hollywood
Yeah, that's
and
all.
Los
That's all I think about
Angeles,
actually when
big
someone says,
urban areas and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah, no, but the crazy part is if you drive from here to San Francisco, a
yeah.
lot of what you're passing is actually like farms. So
Oh,
like cattle
really?
farms. Yeah, oh yeah. There's tons of farms in California, tons of
Ah,
agriculture, and
I see. I see.
in fact, Los Angeles, we had to basically steal our water from the farms of the Central Valley. So she's out from that area, and she grew up, in a family that experienced a divorce at a young age. She grew up in kind of a rural
Environment.
background, and then
Yeah.
they moved out to Modesto, which is still fairly rural and agricultural. Um, and then eventually, as her mother grew up, remarried.
Shannon Rocha, right? So her, just to because we will
Yeah,
probably mention her later on in the show. So this is her mother, Shannon Rocha,
uh, uh,
and
uh,
yeah, of
I'm
course.
gonna say it's pronounced Roca, but
Oh,
I'm
Rocha.
not sure. Yeah,
It's
I'm
probably
guessing.
Rocha. Yeah, yeah. It's probably
Yeah.
Rocha. You're
So,
right.
so yeah, she she had kind of an all-American upbringing, other than I guess maybe even being in a family that's sort of mixed like that in terms of divorces and marriages. Maybe
Yeah.
that's maybe that's become the new all-American thing. But yeah, she's pretty well-rounded individual. I mean, she was a cheerleader in junior high and high school, and then she went to Cal Poly. So that's interesting. It's another Cal Poly um,
Maybe
story,
there's
just like
a conspiracy
smart.
behind this or something, you know? Because
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have been mentioning Cal
It's
Poly for a while now.
there's actually a couple different Cal Polys, but yeah, I mean, no surprise because of all the farm and
It's fake
agriculture,
flags. It's some fake
horticulture.
flags from the government, man. There is no
It's a
Cal Poly.
conspiracy. It's all that's funny. Yeah,
Right.
so yeah, I mean, so and I think here's the interesting thing is you have um, young people who I guess are not afraid of working. So I think that's something that comes, like we talked about that with people from the Midwest
Yeah.
who grew up on farms and who grew up in environments that weren't necessarily like super wealthy. People who grew up with the expectation that they were supposed to work even when they're going to school.
No
So
doubt.
that,
No doubt. Like,
yeah,
I feel like nowadays, like, even like here in Lithuania, we're not like a super wealthy country, but I feel like the younger generation, they don't really want to, work that much. Everyone's like taking it easy. So, it's really actually rare to find young people like Laci, in particular, who actually was willing to work hard, and it seemed that they actually her and her husband Scott Peterson, they actually opened up a few businesses right after they met. So that was interesting. Like the whole situation. I'm sure we're gonna discuss this a little bit later on in the show, but they ran like a fairly successful sports bar at some point, right? So that was very interesting to me that they
yeah,
managed
yeah.
to do this.
It was interesting that they kind of came from this background around. There was a lot of like bars and restaurants in their early working career.
Right.
Maybe that's pretty normal for a lot of young people, where that's the kind of business that doesn't require a lot of expertise. Let's say so.
But it but it
Like
requires like work, you have to sort of
yeah,
like run that thing like 24/7.
yeah. You
It's
got to be on your feet, and yeah, I think we talked about that with the what's her name, Lisa Lamb,
of
where yeah,
course they're
restaurants are
yeah,
like a 18-hour a day business at least. So
yeah.
yeah, so yeah. Speaking of which, so Laci had a friend who worked at a restaurant in Morro Bay, and
Mm,
Morro Bay, by the way, is a pretty interesting place to visit. It's on the way to San Francisco from LA, and it's just one of many scenic towns along the coast on the way to San Francisco. But there's a restaurant called Pacific Cafe, and there was a rather handsome young man who worked there who his name is Scott Peterson. So we'll talk about him for a second because he's also sort of an example of a all-American boy who came from, let's say, a blended family once again. So
he does look a little bit Hawaiian, if you know what I'm saying. Like he has a touch of that. I'm not sure if I'm just like fantasizing right now, but like he does seem like he has those, Hawaiian features, at least a little bit.
he has an interesting look to him. Yeah, I mean, I would say that he could easily pass for having a different background. I'm not. It's a good question. I'm not entirely sure what his exact ethnic mix is, and that's kind of the interesting thing about, I guess, America in general. I mean, someone like me,
Oh yeah.
who's like mixed. I'm mostly mixed Northern and Central European, and then my wife is mixed European and Latino and African, etc., Central American, and then yeah, but yeah. Case in point, yeah, he could easily be Italian, or he could be a Latino, or you could he could almost pass for a lot of different things. I think maybe that's actually part of what makes him so attractive
Oh yeah,
to
because
to a wide
he's
right. He just has a back. He looks like a lot of different people's favorite family members, I guess.
oh yeah, I could see
Yeah,
that being the case. I mean, here in where I'm from, they're all all look the same, so it's we don't have that right here. But yeah, America is interesting like that. So they meet at this restaurant, right? So it was called the
yeah,
Pacific Cafe, and from what I've done, at least from my end of the research, Laci was actually, you know, she made the move first, right? So she gave
yeah.
gave him her number, on like a piece of paper, something like that. Not sure how that situation went down in, but it seemed that she made the move first. So it seemed that she was really interested in him, and it seemed that he was also interested in Laci. They seemed like they were. I mean, also Laci said to her mother when, after her first date with Scott, that she met essentially the man that she was going to marry. That was her quote. So yeah,
Yeah, that was a pretty interesting quote. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's it must have been nice to be him, right? I mean, for those of us that ever had a hard time getting a date,
yeah,
or a girlfriend, yeah, wow. I mean, you look at someone like him, and you're like, he looks like visually like he's a 8 or a 9 out of 10, on the look scale, and it seems like he had a pretty good personality, and
and also
he
on
seems
the
pretty
on the
popular, right?
craziness scale as well.
Yeah, that's the downside. So I mean, if we go into his background for a second, um, he was kind of interesting thing. Now there's a little dark part of it's not on him. His mom had a troubled history that I want to get into at the end of this, that I think maybe will cast some light onto maybe why he was the way he was. It's hard to tell, but I'm gonna sort of sit on that for now and just go into just the surface that
Hmm.
he was born in San Diego. He was the only child of a husband and wife who had previous children from previous relationships. So once again, kind of a Brady Bunch blended family. And he grew up in San Diego suburb, and like I said, San Diego's a really nice area. It's sort of like if you could move to anywhere in California, I would recommend moving to San Diego. It's amazing. And he once again kind of an all-American upbringing. He went to high school. He was an accomplished athlete. He was a golfer. Apparently, by the time he was a teenager, he was regularly able to beat his father at golf. So he was an aspiring college golfer with some tentative plans to become a pro golfer, which I think for some of us, I mean, I don't even like golf that much, and I think I would like to be a pro golfer.
Of
That would
course,
be that
like
good,
of course,
right?
I don't even know
Wow.
like the rules. Just the general, what they do is like put the balls, punt them with their bats, like golfing bats. But like I would definitely want to be a pro. Are you kidding me? They get paid like so much money nowadays.
Oh yeah, and it's such a pleasant sport. I mean, I used to
Oh
golf when
yeah,
I
you
was
don't really have to do much. You just punt punt those balls. You
walking
have
around.
you don't
You're
even
around
have to
luxury
carry
all day.
anything. Yeah, you don't even have to
Yeah,
carry anything. You have like the caddies for you. So
it's super
yeah,
pleasant. Yeah, and you're in good weather, and actually, once again, just not to like oversell my state, but we have some beautiful golf courses here.
you don't have to sell
Um,
it, man. It's like it's already been sold.
so yeah, so he ends up. It was interesting because here's some insights into his personality that was interesting. Was at one point he was at a different college. He was at Arizona State, and it looks like they had some kind of bad run-in where he was a little bit of a party guy, and
Hmm.
I think there was something where
He sort
uh,
of went partying with like another member of his like golf team or something like that, right? I didn't even knew that like
yeah,
colleges have like golf teams. That was interesting for me to hear.
yeah, he was doing that. It was so two things happened. One was that I guess one of his classmates was this guy Mickelson, which I can't remember, Phil Mickelson, who was a
Yeah,
pro. Where I think it
he's
was
a
it
pro
was it
now.
would yeah. So I think it's almost like, imagine you were on like a high school or a college team with someone like Michael Jordan, or or like LeBron or something, where
Like
like
Kobe
even
Bryant,
if
rest in peace.
yeah, Kobe or someone, yeah, where like even if you were good, just being next to this person and having them outshine you, if you didn't have like kind of faith in yourself, or you know what I mean, it just makes even your very good performance look just
Mediocre at best.
mediocre. Yeah. So I think he had a little bit of that going on, and maybe that was playing with some of his personality issues. But
That's
I
interesting. I
think,
haven't even thought about it from that perspective, you know?
yeah. So I think maybe it was just like maybe he was a little hard on himself that he couldn't be like this other guy, but then apparently he got kicked off the golf team. The allegation here is that another Arizona State golfer's dad got him kicked off the golf team for keeping his kid out late and drinking and meeting girls, and they got hung over. And I mean, like,
And the guy was like underage, right? So I
I
think
mean,
that was
yeah,
the allegation.
yeah. We, anybody, because of the strict alcohol laws in this country, yeah, everybody's underage until you're like a senior in college, basically.
Yeah, which is like really
It's like
weird, but
not realistic. Yeah. So
yeah.
so then I guess I don't know. It sounds like they came down a little hard on him. So maybe this was like one of those times where his kind of gregarious and social nature backfired on him, and I guess it seemed to have changed his future. So he ended up switching to a different college and went over to the San Luis Obispo area, which is pretty close to that Morro Bay area, the restaurant he was working. So
Right, so
he ended up.
just a quick
Yeah.
timestamp. He actually met Laci after he got kicked off the golf team, right?
Yeah, so when he transferred, exactly.
Gotcha.
So when he transferred colleges from Arizona,
Gotcha.
which is out there and just a whole state away in the desert, to he moves to the San Luis Obispo area, which is pretty far from San Diego. I mean, it's far from LA, and LA is 2 hours north of San Diego. So it's like 6 hours north. It's a while away, and yeah. So he ends up at Cal Poly over there at San Luis Obispo, and he's working in the area over there at Morro Bay, and he starts doing he changes his major to agricultural business, which seems like
Which
I
he
guess
he didn't dabble in that, right?
yeah, it wasn't really like, I don't think it was a family background, or unlike Laci, who came from that dairy kind of farming family.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know. I just think it was kind of like that's what they
Yeah.
do at that college, and he was like, okay, well, I'm going to do that. But it kind of makes you wonder, gosh, like once again, if he could have stuck with the golf in Arizona State, would we be watching him on TV winning golf tournaments and not hurting somebody? So
Well,
who
we
knows?
still ended up watching it on TV. So
Yeah,
yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah,
But yeah, that being said, he had a really good reputation, at least on the surface. So it's kind of filled with, there are a lot of compliments to this part of his character. So outside of his romantic life, it was always said that other than that party that got him in trouble,
yeah.
he was known for having really good manners. His family said they never needed to yell at him or correct him about anything. And his professor, there's a quote from his professor saying, "I wouldn't mind having a class full of Scott Petersons." So
Well, I think he
yeah.
would retract those statements at this point, to say the least, right? It's almost like he was Ted Bundy like, right?
Yeah. I mean, almost like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, maybe.
Yeah.
So that, yeah. I mean, so I think
He seemed like
like
he from these pictures he does seem like he's that type of person who's like he could be like really deceptive, but he would not like show it. He would seem like a cool dude, but there's probably a lot of things in his head going at almost all times. He seems like that type of a character.
yeah. Well, check it. That's a good point, because here's the interesting thing is before he dates Laci, right before, he has this girlfriend, and it's funny because the girlfriend, I mean, just by my scorecard, I don't think she's as attractive as Laci was, but that's just me. So that
Yeah, that's subjective. Yeah,
it's all subjective. Yeah, I mean, who knows? Personality goes a long way too.
of course.
So he's dating this girl, and to hear her tell it, she was dating him, and I guess he was really energetic at the first part of the relationship and really active, and they used to go out and do stuff and party. And then her complaint about him was he turned into kind of a stay-at-home guy, which wasn't her thing. So
Hmm.
I guess maybe because these are people in their early 20s, right? So maybe
Yeah.
that's what it is. But I mean, because I mean, I'm definitely a stay-at-home kind of guy, so I can kind of. It's funny. There's a lot of times with this story where there's things that are said about him where I'm like, well, a lot of guys are like that. So you know what I mean? It's like it's not like there were a lot of obvious things about him in some ways that like you could just point at that and say, see, he's a sociopath. Watch out for that, because sometimes there's like just things where it's like, you know, a lot of guys do X, Y, Z. But okay, so case in point, so that what happens is, there's no such thing, but this lady says, oh, he's kind of a stay-at-home guy, and she got kind of tired of the relationship and she broke up with him.
Yeah.
And she says he took it pretty hard. But then the crazy thing was, so apparently she was working at that restaurant with him.
Wait. Oh, so they were
Yeah,
like,
so then coworkers or something, and
hmm.
also dating. So then right away he rebounds in like a week and is dating Laci and like bringing her right to the restaurant and like almost like, hey, look who I'm dating. You know what I mean? Like it almost seemed like it was a little bit of a revenge thing. So it does make you wonder ultimately if he
Hmm.
was as
I never
into
even.
her.
Yeah, like
You know what I mean?
I didn't even like thought about it. But at the same time, Lacey did made the first move. So I think he
Yeah.
probably just capitalized on the opportunity or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
she was a lot more into him than he was into her, especially given which like, you know, it sucks because I think all of us guys would love it if the other person would make the first move, the other, you know, the girl would make the first move. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what you know, stereotypically, at least, you know, in the old days, the onus being on the guy to make the first move. Well, of course, like the onus is also on you to get rejected first, right? So like that's really hard to take, and like all of us kind of do love it when someone else expressed interest in us, and like, you know,
It's all with the apps now, man. It's like all on Tinder, and you don't really have to.
you don't have
It's
to.
not even like
No
rejection
more.
anymore. It's like either you swipe, and if someone swipes as well, then that's a match, and
Wow.
then you drop a few corny lines, and then you see what happens. So
No more.
it's not even like that anymore, man.
No more heavy lifting. Oh
Nah.
well. Yeah. Well. So yeah. So here's the interesting thing is, you know, they go and so you know, with that subtext I just gave, they go and they have their first date was a deep sea fishing trip, which
That was
which
so
like,
weird, man. Like, what?
yeah,
Yeah, and we have it
I mean,
marked on our script for a
and
reason.
she because well, yeah, because she gets seasick. So I'm like, okay,
Oh my
so
god, that's
so you know that really there's no reason for her ever to be on a boat from here this point on, right?
just
Because people,
a quick interruption. After this date,
yeah,
she essentially told her mother that I met the man that I'm gonna marry after this sea
seasick.
fishing trip where you get seasick. Okay,
Yeah,
I mean she probably didn't have like really big expectations. Maybe,
it may
maybe Scott was like super, he was like a deceptive guy, so maybe he sort of impressed her
it,
somehow.
it, it it makes you wonder, right? I mean, like someone who's as at least, you know, by my standards, who seems so attractive. She seems like she was really super sold on this dude, and I get he's a really good looking guy. And maybe I don't know, who knows what the reasons for that feed into it. I
Yeah,
mean, he's got kind of a Ben Affleck look to him or something, but
yeah, I can see that a little
yeah,
bit.
there's something about him that, I mean, it's just undeniable that he's not ugly for sure. But yeah, it is interesting that like she was moving kind of fast. So I wonder if that was also the mismatch, was that she seems like she was pretty gung ho to like, you know, get married, have a kid,
Gung
and then,
ho.
you know, there's just it's like an old expression,
Ah,
like
I see,
very
I see.
very yeah, it's like a old timey.
I've
Like
never heard about
something
this one
you never heard
before,
it.
man.
I
Nah.
think it means something in Cantonese, but I'm not sure. It's like an old timey like,
Ah, I see.
yeah, it's something that like probably my grandfather's generation would say more,
Ah,
but yeah, or like maybe John Wayne would say it. So yeah, just she seems like really super motivated to get married and
yeah,
have kids, and they're only in their early 20s. Like when this happened, like
yes,
she's only
that's.
she's only a year older than me, so I was only in, like
Hmm.
when I was that age, I was for sure not ready to have a kid,
Of
and I
course.
was married. I was also married pretty early, so just saying.
Yeah, like no, that's interesting how these people like really go fast, like in terms of their relationships and stuff like that. I feel like I'm 24 right now. I feel like I'm not doing that anytime soon. So yeah,
Right,
that's
right.
interesting.
So anyways, yeah, it I can't actually find when they actually got married, because it talks about how in their senior year, it says Scott had the first of at least two extramarital affairs, but and they never really said when they got married. So that was the part where in our
Mm.
research, I was kind of confused. But I'm assuming they got married before they graduated. Maybe that's what this is implying. But
Yeah, maybe they did open up at some point the shack. So
oh, actually, I'm sorry. I just
oh
contradicted myself. I found it. So they got
oh,
married
perfect,
after her graduation.
perfect.
So
So
still pretty early.
pretty early,
Yeah,
yeah.
1997. So yeah, it's funny. I actually got married in 98, and that was literally like 3 months out of college. So yeah,
Damn,
I mean
yeah,
they're getting married pretty early for California, middle class.
that's very early, right?
That's pretty early. Yeah.
So they actually opened up a sports bar, as we mentioned, right? So from what I've gathered, this probably is the picture right here, but I could be wrong, but this seems like it's the shack that the story refers to. So for it started off rough for them, this business. They did not make that much money, but after a while, they actually started making like a good amount of money, from what I've gathered.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it makes you wonder if this was like the beginning of too much togetherness, right? Because of just the kind of time you got to put into a restaurant, and
That's
then
that's that's way too much time, man.
yeah,
It's like you're literally the whole day, every day you're like together. So I think that's too much, and yeah,
high stress,
exactly.
and once again, it's like you're not even really grown up at that age. I mean, you'll be like you're us. You'll definitely be a different person 10 years from now than you are right now.
I believe so, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was bound to happen, and they opened up this successful business, but they run the shack essentially when they're still like sort of in a stage where they're just sort of like, I guess, being young and partying and stuff like that. But then when they actually decide to have a family, to have like kids, they move back to Obispo, right? So they moved back to where Laci's parents were situated, and right. So then they essentially, Laci gets pregnant after a while. So this is where the craziness starts, right?
Yeah. Actually, Modesto, right? So yeah, they
Oh
moved back
yeah,
to
my bad. Yeah,
Modesto,
Modesto. Yeah,
and then which is once again not as fun as San Luis Obispo. That's like a more kind of once again it's like a cow town. It's a Central Valley farming area. It's not scenic like
their
San
house
Luis
seems
Obispo or
their
Morro
house
Bay.
seems like fairly, like a Californian house, to say like the least. Like seems like such a Californian home to me,
Yeah,
and I'm not
single
sure.
story ranch style.
Right,
Yeah.
I'm trying to find the date. This Google Earth image is probably done way after everything went down, I assume. So other people are living here, but yeah, you could see like that this was the house that they actually lived. So it's an interesting little neighborhood that they moved in, right? At least for me, it seems like it actually reminds me a little bit of that home where John Benet Ramsey was found dead. Like the John Benet Ramsey residence, or at least like the like the general neighborhood. It seems like a standard U.S. neighborhood to me. Like
Yeah.
I actually wouldn't even say that this is from California. This seems like Midwest or something.
Yeah, it's true, right? So that's a good case in point. Is it is just very like almost middle America-ish, and maybe that was once again, part of the problem. Maybe it was too much settling down and
The
back
the
to family
neighbors
life.
the neighbors seemed like they were balling
For some reason, yeah, for some reason the neighbors built a mansion.
in the middle of nowhere, but okay.
Yeah,
With like statues of like this guy. Why did they have this statue right
I
there?
don't know what happened there. Maybe they were filming a movie there. Yeah, I know. That's I
Okay,
mean, we could
but
do a whole show in their house.
yeah,
Uh, but so yeah, so like we said, we already there were some issues where it looks like, so based on a couple things we've read and seen, it seems like Scott was known to kind of fool around and lie. So it'd be one thing to fool around. It's already not good to fool around on your partner, you know, and with the other person knowing. I guess like that would be one kind of cheating, if the person you were cheating with knew that you had a girlfriend or a wife. Um, but in this case, it looks like he actually lied to um, to
the
to
right,
to the person he was going to cheat with.
and
So
the person was a wait, let me just because I have her.
massage therapist, yeah,
Her name was
Amber
Amber
Free.
Free, right? So this is the woman right here, and yeah, she actually stated that Scott said that he was, single and looking, and
Yeah. The whole story was he was at like a convention. Oh yeah, so just before we can get into that, once again, like he went from wanting to be a pro golfer to being like basically a fertilizer salesman, making making $60,000 a year, which frankly
I
for a
mean
sales
it's
job, I mean
it's
it
not
sounds
that
like a
bad,
lot,
man.
and yeah, I mean so and it is 2002.
2002, so that's probably like
So
100K in today's standards, or close
yeah,
to
yeah,
that.
no, you're right. I think for some parts of the country, that salary in that year was pretty good. The only reason why I'm kind of being a little bit hard on it is that in California salaries are higher because the cost of living tended to be higher.
Oh yeah,
Um, and sales jobs are supposed to pay higher. So salespeople here in California will often make as much as CEOs make in other parts of the country because of how important
of
the
course, like
money
this.
is to the company.
Yeah, like the sales guys are like literally like the lifeblood of companies, So
Yeah, the guys and gals that work sales. I mean, I think I it kind of blew my mind when I really found out some of these sales professionals that I work with. No wonder they are so important because they make good money because they generate a lot of revenue. It sounds like, I mean, it may have just been that the company he's working for wasn't that big, and it may have also be that selling fertilizer may not be a super lucrative living. But yeah, I mean, the other thing was he was probably pretty close to entry level, so maybe I'm being a little hard on him. But
right, so
it sounds like kind of a boring job. But he was at some kind
yeah,
of convention, right? And he was flirting with some other woman and saying like his name tag should say like "I am horny" or something like
a
that, or
horny
"horny and
bastard,
looking."
something
Yeah,
like that, yeah.
so it's like, okay, so that's not. I don't know. That doesn't sound
And
like a
and this is happening when
his wife's pregnant.
is already pregnant, right? So yeah,
Yeah, so that's already like kind of
I mean,
not.
it definitely seems that he was not super committed into that whole family life situation because, like,
Yeah,
he probably was like realizing, damn, this is not for me. This is boring, right?
yeah, and once again, it's like one of those things where okay, on one hand, it is pretty scummy behavior. He's not the only person to ever act like that, and in some places and in some cultures, that's actually sad to say not that unusual and sometimes tolerated. I would
Mm.
say here in California and here in America, because America tends to be a little bit more puritanical about that. Um, it's not okay. In like some place like France, maybe there's more leeway. I mean,
I don't know,
not to pick on the
man.
French, but I've heard that like in
Yeah,
France, it's a little more. I mean, maybe not when your wife's pregnant, but I've heard that in other
yeah.
countries, like so, but by American standards, it was not okay the way he was acting. So,
I mean, yeah,
um,
yeah, no doubt. Like in America, it's probably more like, that type of behavior is a little bit more like shunned down, you know. But like here in Europe, I could probably say, that people, especially like I would say people that, or like men that have like money, the main like if you
yeah.
have if you're like a successful person and you have money, then I feel like there's just so much opportunities to actually, uh, cheat on your wife or say. I mean, that's a scumbag move, but it
or
does happen. Yeah.
or if you're like a Kennedy, because the
Oh
Kennedys were
yeah,
always
like
notorious
no, yeah,
for doing that.
Kennedy,
Yeah,
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 or
John and
you're a
Bobby and
Kennedy.
everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. My kid watches The Simpsons all the time. She watches like
Yeah.
all the reruns, and like every other Simpsons is like a joke with
About the
like Mayor.
Kennedys.
Yeah, with Mayor Quimby
Oh
is is
yeah.
supposed to be the Kennedy. So anyway, yeah. So um, so they start this relationship, and she has no idea what's going on, and she has no idea this guy is involved, and I think at some point before she finds out the truth about him,
Mm.
she gets some kind of wind that he was married, and he has to make up some lie that like, oh, his wife died, and this is the first
Come on, man, that's
Chris. I
so
know.
messed up.
Ugh, like I don't. And then once again, it was like it's weird because some aspects of this are almost like the Casey Anthony thing, where it's somebody that's doing things. Maybe it's the same kind of sociopathy, where it's like the person's digging a
It's like a
hole.
yeah, and he and
You know what I
and,
mean?
and keeps on digging, right? He
Yeah,
doesn't
where it's like
really it
it's not
doesn't
going to
really
end well.
right. It doesn't register in their brain that this. There's like you should probably like stop digging that hole already, but like these types of people seem to like dig that hole until it's too late, right? So that's
Yeah,
actually what we will come to find out what actually happened, right?
right. So yeah, so meanwhile, it's the holidays, and um, what happens is we should get into her disappearance here. So uh, Scott and Laci go to this salon called Salon. Um,
Yeah, I was trying to find it and I was like, am I writing this down correctly?
yeah,
Salon, salon?
what a name. Yeah. So where apparently Laci's sister works, and I guess
I
she
have
cuts
a
his hair all
picture
the time.
somewhere. I'm trying to find it.
So they're they're all kind of talking.
Right, so
Apparently,
by the way, this is her sister. If you're watching this on YouTube, this is her sister. So she was, I guess, a hairdresser, and it was a casual thing for I guess, Laci and Scott to go to the salon and get, a haircut, essentially.
that makes sense. I bet you if I had someone that cut hair in the family, I would definitely do that too.
Facts.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So apparently, Scott during this conversation while they're all talking, Scott's gonna go says he's gonna go pick up some fruit basket that
That was an
uh,
interesting thing, like a fruit
yeah.
basket for Christmas as a present. I mean, I don't know, man. That seemed like a unusual present. So that's just a random thing that stood out for me.
Yeah, and then it was one of those things where it's funny. Like I always hear that like when someone makes up too many reasons why they have to do something and has too many details, that's like a sign of guilt. So apparently he'd
Mm.
been busy telling all these different people that he was going to be playing golf, quote unquote, at a golf course nearby, and he told several different groups of people. I don't know why that was so exciting that he had to tell everybody,
He was probably doing
but
that almost every other day, right? So why is he mentioning the fact that he's gonna be playing golf to literally everyone? It's like it's so weird. Like it's like telling, like if I would go and tell my friends like I'm gonna go and pick up some milk from the store,
yeah,
and I would tell
yeah.
everyone I know that I'm gonna go and pick some milk from the store. It definitely seems like someone who is building a potential alibi.
Yeah, yeah, like going way out of his way. And then, interestingly, the sister does say that she spoke with Laci on the telephone around 8:30 p.m. that night. So
Does
we
it
know
say what
she's
they
at
were
least.
what they were speaking about? Maybe Lacey gave some sort of an indication into anything interesting.
No, that's the only detail I have is just I
Right.
guess they were having a normal phone call. Um, so then Peterson's story is that the last time he saw her was on December 24th when he went to go fishing at Berkeley Marina. So,
Right. I mean, first of all, why all of these disappearances? At least it definitely seems to me that they're all happening around that
Christmas,
Christmas,
right?
right? Like
Yeah.
John Benny Ramsey, Laci Peterson. I feel like someone else who we have not covered, or maybe we have covered someone else who also vanished on the Christmas time. I feel like Christmas is like for some reason they try to single out like these. Maybe the holidays bring some sort of emotions to these people who tend to do crazy things. I don't know. Maybe that could be the
Yeah.
case because I just sort of like noticed that it's happening around that like December 22nd to December 25th. Like dates that crazy things tend to happen, right?
Yeah, it's also, it's the winter equinox, so they are the shortest days of the year right around then. And it makes you wonder if that is that setting off people's moods where they're just, like the days are short and the nights are long. And I don't know, makes you, and it's cold.
Yeah.
Maybe that's some of it. But yeah,
Even
so,
in LA, right? I mean, in California as
oh yeah,
well.
yeah, even here it gets a
Like you
little
would
bit
probably have to
depressing.
wear like do you ever like wear like coats or anything like that?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. It can get where I live. It can get into the 30s in the mornings. It gets cold right around then.
Right.
But yeah, it
Yeah.
depends. But there's been other Christmases where like I've been able to go swimming. So yeah, it just depends.
Depends,
Um,
right?
so so yeah. So then he says Laci was watching cooking shows and gonna mop the floor and bake cookies and walk the dogs and
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 and immediately someone who is 8.5 months pregnant, I don't think, I mean, I've never been around someone like that for a long period of time, but it would seem that when you're right about to have a kid, you probably don't do that much, you probably don't like do chores for like literally the whole day. So that's off the bat, like maybe it's normal, I'm not sure, but just for me, that seemed a little bit odd.
yeah, it seems super active. And then the next morning, a female neighbor says that she found the dog loose and from the yard, returns him to the yard. And then um another another neighbor says they found the dog walking around with a muddy leash. And it just is there's a lot of weirdness around the dog being loose. And then Peterson says he comes back to the home that afternoon after quote unquote fishing. And you know
Yeah.
finds the home empty and the dog in the backyard. And meanwhile the car's still in the driveway. And he says he showered and washed his clothes because he got wet from fishing. Which this
I
whole
mean,
fishing thing turned out to be kind of a key part of the
key
case.
part of the case, but wait, didn't he say that he was going golfing to everyone? Wait, why did he
Yeah,
go
yeah.
fishing?
So
So
it was
I
like
think that's a little bit flip floppy right there, right?
it's weird. He has like a lot of like I don't understand if I guess if he was supposed to be golfing the day before, but he made a big. So then I guess the question is, what was he really doing if he wasn't golfing? What was he was he doing preparations or something? Was he staging something, or was he going off having his little fling? Yeah,
That's very interesting, but Lacey does end up essentially missing. And the thing that I wanted to, discuss a little bit is the fact that there's almost seems like there's a hole in the story. Even when I did my research, it just seems that the whole disappearance is not as widely covered as it should have been, right? I mean, the whole disappearance part, like what I'm trying to say is that the timestamps, right? She just goes missing, and there's like a bunch of different like I guess allegations on what happened next, because there are some I guess sources that state that Scott made a phone call to the police. Then there are others that say that Laci's, I believe, stepfather made the call to the police. So, do you have any actual details on who made the police call and how that whole situation went down with the calling of the police? Because it seems
No,
like even the police doesn't know who actually called the police. You know?
it's so strange how it's almost very similar to the Casey Anthony thing, where there's kind of dispute over whether the mom or who called the police when, like whether the mom called the police when she found the car with, what I mean, the smell, all those things. So it was like that same kind of, yeah, a whole bunch of like kind of
Go down to the
weirdness
street.
about a missing person and confusion about when they got reported. But whoever reported them, the cops show up and they do like an initial search of the house, and they're like, yeah, it's kind of weird. There's this 8.5 months pregnant, 7 or 8.5 months pregnant person, walking around doing this stuff, and yeah, they notice like her wallet and her keys and everything are still in the house, so that
Right, and
is
her
a
car's
pretty.
parked by by the driveway, but at the same time she wasn't supposed to take the car. She was supposed, like, the one thing that I think I've figured it out. I believe Scott Peterson, at least, his official statement was that he was actually waiting for Laci to get back from walking the dog.
Yeah, but then she didn't even have her sunglasses, which even that was like, I think that was probably where he messed up. He probably should have, when the thing happened, he probably should have taken the sunglasses, because yeah, even her keys and her wallet, like how is she going to get back in the house? So that
Right,
was,
right. Like,
yeah.
how is she going to get back into in her home back with after walking the dog when she doesn't even have the keys or, the sunglasses, the purse, like, I mean, and she was going to the nearby park, so she wasn't like walking the dog, just, around the corner. She was supposedly going with the dog somewhere pretty far away to the park. So that's interesting. That doesn't really make much sense to me at all. I'm
And
gonna,
then
yeah.
so then the other thing, I guess, and this is where we get into, I guess, the kind of his downfall is two things. So one was his demeanor is just not at all what the police are used to from somebody who reports a missing person. So just imagine anywhere in the world when someone's family member goes missing and they don't know where they are, and there are all these red flags. Usually people that are innocent
Right.
get really upset, and they're like, where's my child, where's my wife, where's my dad, where's this person? They start going through all the scenarios in their head of all the awful things that could happen. Maybe they got hit by a car, maybe
And
they
this
fell,
guy, and this
and
guy's like, I don't know,
this guy's,
I don't know,
he's
like
calm.
yeah,
It's like, oh, well, just call me when you find her. He's just, it's
for
just
real.
like, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, almost that cold. Where like,
Wait.
so that was,
I have the beginning
yeah,
audio of the phone call. So we can
yeah.
like listen to it for a few seconds. Let's see what he actually said.
We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, fix the penalty at death.
The sentence is
Oh wait, I have the wrong one. It's when he gets sentenced. This one right here. Let's listen to it real quick. Obviously, we should turn on the audio as well.
My daughter's been missing since this morning. She's 8 months pregnant.
It's the 911.
My daughter's been missing since this morning. She's 8 months pregnant.
Wait,
But
that's
he's
the
like,
dad, right?
oh
That's got to be
yeah,
her
of
dad,
course.
right?
Okay, so that solves it. I guess the father made the phone call. Yeah, but the guy was like, yeah, but like, why is not even? Yeah, that's immediately a red flag. Why Scott was not the one who contacted like the you know police?
And then like you said, he'd given this whole golfing story to everybody, and he was like, oh wait, no, I went fishing for sturgeon way far away at
And
the Berkeley
right,
Marina. And Berkeley Marina is pretty far from Modesto for sure. It's
the
a
dog, the dog. Let's not forget about the dog. That neighbors of Laci and Scott Petersons, they actually found their dog whose name was Mackenzie, and right, their dog was just sort of on its own in the neighborhood, like, and there were like two different times when like the owners were returning the dogs to like their I guess yard or something like that.
And then the dog was it's true because it's like if the dog was supposed to be part of the alibi for like, oh, she was walking the dog and she got kidnapped, but then maybe the neighbors kept messing that up and bringing the dog back too soon. So then like I guess given what we're going to say about what he did, it almost sounds like he kind of let the dog back out again just to make sure that alibi was out there. So between that and like I was out
But the dog
golfing,
was
oh no, I was
actually
out.
just standing around, like around like the neighborhood,
Yeah,
and he was probably like ran away or
why do you
something,
keep
right? Yeah.
Yeah, why do you keep letting me out of the yard, dude? Yeah, so and then the neighbors would go and he'd like so yeah, I mean it seems like maybe he was pretending not to be home when that was happening, but yeah, his demeanor's really weird, and then the cops couldn't help but notice that the phone book was open on the kitchen counter to a full page ad for a defense lawyer.
Come on, man.
So I mean, yeah, when do you ever look that up? I mean,
Talk about
I-
shooting yourself in the leg, man.
It's like self-destructive behavior. So yeah, but then I mean the main thing was here's a quote was that one of the detectives says, I suspected Scott when I first met him. Didn't mean he did it, but I was a little bit thrown off by his calm, cool demeanor and his lack of questioning. He wasn't, will you call me back? Can I have one of your cards? What are you guys doing now? So, like he wasn't doing the things that people normally do when one of their family members goes missing. He seemed like really passive and
yeah.
not super interested in it. So that I think
yeah.
really set them off. So, I so this was, I think the part where like people like me, our attention started getting focused on it because there was this big search for her. And then, like week after week goes, and then pretty soon you start to see these cracks in sort of the solidarity of the family with Scott, because I think the family started to really detect that there was something wrong. At least her family, Laci's family, the
Right.
Rocas, were like, this doesn't really seem right. And I think they really did start to suspect that Scott had something to do with
But
it.
initially,
And I think,
but initially, from my end of the research, they actually did not suspect Scott. They
Right,
actually sort
right.
of believed. So this, just I guess speaks a lot about Scott's ability to manipulate, people into thinking a certain way about him, right? So he probably,
Yeah.
and he was a salesman, so he could probably sell his story, right? So he was a
That's true, and then-
deceptive person, to say, the least.
there's also something called the halo effect where, like people that are handsome or beautiful, often they are able to get, Casey Anthony, case in
Casey
point.
Anthony, yeah.
Yeah, you see someone like that, and you can't imagine that there could be any ugliness underneath that, and especially if they are good at, like it seemed like he was always good at being good. Yeah, I mean, at least on the surface, he hadn't really gotten into trouble other than the golf party. Yeah, so, at some point, finally, about a month later, the Roca family withdraws their support. And they did this because it turns out that Amber Frey came forward. So what happened was, as this case breaks,
Yeah.
his face is all over the news, and, she's not
One
like
call that
living in a cave or something. She watches the news too, like the rest of us, and she's like, hey, there's that guy that I'm dating that told me his wife died, like
2 weeks-
before she died.
2 weeks
Yeah.
prior to her disappearance. Okay.
2 weeks early, and
Okay.
seems to be lying about things. So I mean, good for her. I mean, in a way, she's kind of a hero in all of this, because A, she had no idea she was dating a married man, and B, when she did the right thing. So like when she had suspicions that maybe she was involved with somebody that had committed a horrible crime, like she went to the cops. She said, hey, I'll cooperate with you. Let me like wear a wire and record my phone calls and things like that.
I mean,
And
we have
yeah,
a quick audio clip from that from Amber's statement. Let's just hear it out for a few seconds, man.
To record her
Yeah.
phone calls with him.
My God, I wish I could tell you everything, Amber.
Right, so this is the phone call that Amber actually cooperated with the police, and she actually called Scott while the police was listening in on the phone call. So let's hear what Scott had to say.
God, I wish I could tell you everything, Amber.
Save your tears.
I'm so sorry.
Tell me I should not be afraid of you.
I'm not an evil person.
You're not an evil person.
I would never hurt anyone.
What are you doing to me right now?
Could it be that Peterson
Whoa, that phone call seemed so off. Like, what the hell is
Yeah.
that phone call all about? Like, that just like, I guess Amber, trying to get some dirt on Scott while the police is listening in on them. But who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty fascinating stuff, and the thing just went. I mean, it just went way long. The guy was acting pretty squarely. I remember just me being as like a normal person living here in California and watching this thing, and it just, the longer it went, the more it must be hard for somebody who isn't super sincere to pretend to be sincere about anything. I mean, Casey Anthony, case in point, it was pretty obvious from her behavior. I mean, she didn't even last 2 seconds with her sincerity, but just for someone whose heart wasn't in it, it seems like he couldn't fake it even to keep his survival. I mean, one of the things that the cops point out in both his trial and in his appeal was like he ordered like he upgraded to like 2 different adult cable channels like the same week that she disappeared.
Oh, really?
So yeah,
Jeez.
this is back in when cable was still a big thing here, but yeah, I mean,
This guy doesn't seem like he's the sharpest tool in the shed.
I mean, he just can't like control himself. I guess maybe that's
But then
part of the problem.
Right, but then after, on April 13th, 2003, a couple walking their dog actually found a body of a decomposing body, essentially, but also a well-preserved body of a late-term male fetus in a marshy area of the San Francisco Bay Shore in Richmond's Point, Isabella Regional Shoreline Park, north of Berkeley. So, after a while, that fetus actually was Connor, right? So that was their son, at least they, an unborn son, who they already gave him a name. So it was Connor, right? So that's a couple walking down just found the body of their son, and then after a little while, right? So that this is another interesting fact. Maybe you can have some theories on this. Why did both the fetus's body and as well as I guess Laci's body were found like in 2 days, like one right after the other, but the initial search took like 3 months? Like, is this only a coincidence that like both of their bodies were found at the same time, or was it that maybe they found like the fetus and they started heavily searching that area and they found the body as well?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think your latter point makes sense. I feel like maybe what happened was, because this is what the cops could never really find the perfect evidence for this, but they think that he probably made some kind of like homemade concrete anchors and probably tried to dispose of the bodies like mob style, like cut off identifying features and then somehow package them in a way that you would.
So how the body was found, at least Laci's body was, I was reading it and god damn how she was decapitated and her limbs were missing. Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
so that way you couldn't identify,
Jesus
dental
Christ.
records or fingerprints or anything, and then
some theories around the internet suggest that Scott actually did it in this in his garage prior to giving all of this like fake golfing / fishing story. So he actually
So-
chopped of the body. But this is just a theory.
That makes sense. Yeah, to tie in with that, and sort of the other kind of sad part about his family life, he had a couple of siblings actually, that his mother had actually given up for adoption before she married his father. So that's a whole other thing I'm going to go into, because I think that was strangely, that was the part that disturbed me the most. But the sister had met him really late in life, and had a really positive impression of him, and actually, in fact, during the kind of the months leading up to the trial, they'd actually, she and her husband actually kind of harbored him in his house. He was actually overlooking the same exact body of water where Laci and the fetus were later found, but which is the whole time he's saying, "Oh, don't bother looking there. She's not in there. You guys, there's nothing there. She's missing." And then she turns up in that place. But the thing that was interesting was, well, two things. So one was that she said that his demeanor seemed really weird during those last months of the marriage. So he seemed like he was in kind of a weird mood, and he was very cold, and that he was on the phone all the time. Like, they had this one family trip where actually her kid suddenly went missing. She had a 3-year-old, and it was like in like a ski lodge or something where, like 3-year-olds can fall down and get hurt. There was I guess the kid was eventually found on like a dangerous balcony, and she said the whole time when the whole family's like screaming and scrambling, like, where's little Billy or whatever the kid's name was, he didn't move a muscle. He sat there on the phone the whole time, and it's like, whoa, is he talking to like that Amber lady on the phone, like when all this is going down with the family right there in the room? What kind of person? So he seemed pretty checked out. But I think the thing that she said that I thought was interesting was, she said that Laci really liked going in their pool because the pool is making, like to your point about all this supposed walking around and stuff, with like her being so pregnant. So apparently she was feeling the stress and the weight, and the like you're carrying a lot of weight in front of you when you're pregnant like that. And she said that she'd like to lay down in the pool because it made her back feel better. And the sister's theory was that he killed her in the pool, probably.
Jeez.
Yeah, that maybe like that was how he got it going, and then like maybe he drowned her in there, and maybe, I mean, who knows if the baby.
But at the same time, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's take a quick peek at the actual pool, because I know we can see it from the satellite footage.
Oh, it's a nice pool.
It's a fairly nice pool, right?
Yeah, I'll take it.
Same here, but the neighbors have a little bit nicer one because they're like building.
Oh yeah, the mansion.
Yeah. But like at the same time, like if Scott actually
did it, could he do it unobserved? Yeah, that's the question.
Unobserved, and at the same time, isn't that like a whole bunch of work to clean the body out of the pool unless you strangle them? I mean, I immediately assume.
Yeah. You'd have to drown her first and then drag her. So you're right. You still have to drag her, and then how do you drag her without leaving skin and stuff like that when you drag her out?
There's probably a lot of DNA in that you essentially have to. Yeah, you essentially have to clean out the pool, so maybe that was not the case. I mean, from what I've researched, that he may have actually done it in, as I've said, like, if you could go back like on that Christmas evening into this, I guess, garage, and just like be like flies in there, I think we would see some really crazy stuff, like. Yeah,
once again, it makes you wonder, like, just not taking a side, but it's like, once again, how does someone do that? Like, the mechanics of it, especially, like, I mean, it's one thing when it's some like jaded mob hitman who's done it 100 times, but when it's just a normal family,
I mean, who knows?
Guy.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Like, we don't know about Scott Peterson, like what he actually could have done besides this,
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, we don't know what other secrets he's harboring. So, when the bodies turn up, the cops start to get nervous because the guy's acted squirrely this whole time, and they're like, okay, if there ever was a time where he would try to leave the country, this would be it. So they put a tracker. It's almost like something out of a movie, right? They put a tracker in his car, and they're like, okay, let's just see where he goes after this. I mean, it's interesting because it's also an opportunity, right? Because if he's going to get emotionally disturbed or panicked, this will be the time. So they put a tracker in his car, and his family's from San Diego, which is like San Diego is just next door to Mexico. So, and it's as an American, it's still pretty easy to cross the border back and forth to Mexico. So even with kind of the heightened security concerns around immigration stuff like that, it's still like definitely Mexico welcomes Americans. So so they're a little nervous about that, and so lo and behold, he suddenly when they grab him near La Jolla Golf Course, and he claimed he was meeting his father. It's always this golf. Golf is always the excuse, right?
This guy is always golfing all the time.
He should have just been a golfer. All this, this was like the universe telling him he should have been a pro golfer. So I mean, and he's done like everything in the book. So he did like stuff that was similar to OJ too, in terms of like he had like money, and he had $15,000 in cash. He had survival gear. He has camping equipment, 4 cell phones, several he's like James Bond or something. Was he working for the CIA? I mean, was he? And he had his brother's driver's license, including his own. And the family tried to make up all kinds of excuses that he was using it to get a resident discount at the golf course. And,
Jesus, it's always the golf, man.
The golf is his master alibi, and so. They think he's clearly planning to flee to Mexico, and that's when they arrest him.
Right. Like, so that's when they arrest him, and I guess we're probably wrapping up this episode soon. So let's just, I guess, discuss the fact that there was not that much actual evidence to against Scott. So I mentioned to you prior to this, prior to recording the episode, I couldn't really find anything concrete that they had on Scott, so they just I guess gave him a death sentence essentially, just because of the situational stuff, right? It was all I don't want to say
circumstantial,
yeah. So it was all about that, right? They could not actually find anything concrete. At least I didn't read upon it, right?
Yeah, I mean, and just as a side note, so I remember the first trial I was on the jury for, the prosecutor made a pretty big point
death row.
that a lot of trials and convictions are done on circumstantial evidence, that it is pretty hard, especially back then. I mean, nowadays it's easier because there's cameras everywhere, but it used to be pretty hard to catch somebody on camera doing a crime, or having like all this DNA evidence to point to their guilt. I mean, you would wonder, like to your point, like where did he take apart the bodies or do things like that? And we don't know, right? I mean, because the blood evidence like that is often pretty hard to hide. But
we have we have a quick clip from the trial, and then we can discuss a little bit about it.
The above entitled cause fix the penalty at death.
This sentence is death. Jurors reached their dramatic decision to send Scott Peterson to death row after 12 hours of deliberations. Scott Peterson showed no emotion as he heard himself sentenced to die, other than to clench his jaw. Inside Edition's Jim Moray.
It was standing room only inside that.
Dated was laced.
Right, so just a quick clip. So he actually did not have any reactions to getting the death sentence. He clenched his jaw, essentially. That's the only reaction that he gave when he got the death sentence. So, yeah. Yeah,
maybe that's. I mean, it's kind of a sore point I have with our state, because I'm actually a big death penalty supporter here, but our state has an amazingly if you don't like the death penalty, then you'll be happy to know that our state almost never executes anybody, unlike a state like Texas, let's say. Which does it all the time.
I mean, it's a very controversial topic, like, I'm personally not for the death penalty, but that's just me, so like, because obviously, I live in a country that you rarely have like cases where like you would have to give someone the death penalty, or like you would feel like they deserve the death penalty. So it's like, I guess it's just where I'm from, But yeah, like in California, it's the death penalty is like the people are like, what was like the last person executed like in 2006 or something.
Yeah, something ridiculous like that. Like I mean, ridiculous by my standards. So
Yeah.
and it is admittedly a complicated topic in some ways. So I'm not saying that anybody that doesn't share my opinion is wrong. But just from my point of view, it surely doesn't serve its point as a deterrent at this point, because you're way more likely to die of old age or of a disease or something, which is 100% the case.
I mean, for
with
some,
a lot of
for someone like the Golden State Killer, you would probably think that.
Oh yeah,
that's probably.
He'll never get executed.
Yeah, but like you would, you sort of feel like, yeah, like this guy, for all that he had, has done, he probably deserves like the capital punishment, or at least like some people would think that, so. Yeah, and you have a lot of those types of characters in California, so it almost enables people. You know what I'm saying? It almost enables people to do crazy stuff, because like if they look up at least a little bit, like do a little bit of research into the death penalty, they would probably know that they can do so much crazy stuff and just be in death row for like 20 years.
Yeah, and then even the way that we do it, so we do lethal injection, which. Like, I don't get it. So I like, there are people who have cancer who are dying painful deaths, who wish they could get lethal injection and can't get it. But then some of the worst people, we give what I think is a pretty easy way to die. So, like, people get to die like as easy as like, my dog or cat at the vet. You know what I mean? They get to die this nice, peaceful.
So what do you suggest? The electrical chair?
Yeah. That's
Jesus
what I mean. Well, let me get on my soapbox for a second.
Yeah.
We used to hang people, and hanging is like it's a more complicated thing than it sounds like, because it is. We do have something in the Constitution against cruel and unusual punishment. So that's where things like this came from, was that the electric chair, because of like botched executions and things where it didn't go well. But I would say, okay, well, that's fine. Like maybe sometimes when we try to make it too complicated is where it could be something that's cruel and unusual, though I would say in a lot of cases maybe these people deserve cruel and unusual deaths. But I would say that hanging or firing squads or things like that, where the person gets to feel some shame, before that, like I think there was a community aspect to things like that, where it's like it's for sure
really
it's dark.
Like just to think about it, like when you just put it, like even the lethal injection is just like really dark to think about. Like you just put someone on the bed or something like that, you tie him up and you like inject something and then he dies. I mean, it's just a dark thing to think about, like I guess
it is. Yeah. I mean, I just always think like the things that a lot of these people have put other people through.
Know how I view it? I view it like these people are most likely crazy, and I view it from a standpoint that no one's really guilty of anything. It's like if you're born crazy, you're gonna do like crazy things, and you're just fucking crazy at this. Like there's nothing you can do about like that. But like Scott Peterson did seem like he was a scumbaggy person more than he was crazy. So I could see your point for this guy right here. He seemed like he was just a scumbag.
What's funny is, I mean, I don't know. It's in his case, or even in Casey Anthony's case, I actually wouldn't necessarily be for them. So I think they're, I think the kind of people that I'm talking about, it must sound pretty harsh.
Like
I'm talking about like firing squads,
right?
Yeah, someone like that. Or I mean, there's some worse ones that I'm not even going to get into, because it drives me too crazy to think of.
for other episodes.
Yeah, I can't. It's funny. Like the one thing I don't like to talk about too much is when like children get hurt. I think that's that's like kind of my sore point. So I don't like to go into.
I think that's a sore point for like a lot of people, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me. It's for whatever reasons. It's like
And
a
in
no
this
no
case
go
in
area for
particular,
me.
an unborn child was essentially like ripped out of the mother's stomach. Yeah, because
Yeah,
the umbilical cord was actually ripped out. It was not like
yeah.
cut, so it was like, yeah, it's like a
It's pretty disturbing, but I mean, that being said, I mean, he doesn't seem like he was a torturer or anything like. I mean, there's definitely different.
he probably just killed them for some reason. He probably like really got
Yeah,
tired of that life. He wanted to change his life. He killed them both, and then he the manner that the body was found, Laci's body, would like suggest that almost like a torture was at place, but also that was probably just Scott being at least somewhat aware that he probably needs to hide the head and the arms just from like from getting like because like if they find the head, then they have dental records, which is a no-no, right, at that point. But also another thing is like you could tell that Scott was, if he I'm still gonna say if he did it, because there are some people that don't think that he did it, but Scott is probably like you have to be an insane person if to kill someone. Like I could see like normal people killing other people, like that's like that could happen, like people go to wars and stuff like that, and you just kill people because that's just how things are, you have to kill them. But like to kill someone and then dissect their head, chop off those limbs, like if I for say killed someone, I could not like cut someone's head off. Like that's so, like that's, you have to be a maniac at that point,
yeah.
like
It doesn't seem like a crime of passion. Like when you think of the crime of passion, where like one person comes into the bedroom and finds their spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend with like someone else, and then they they react and out of anger. But like those people are usually not chopping up the bodies of their victims, right? They shoot or stab somebody, and then the cops get called, and then the next thing they know, they're in the court, and they they probably are actually sorry for what they did, even though they did something in the moment. There's even sometimes people are actually able to get away with insanity for that. There was a guy. I think it was. It was here in the United States. I can't remember if it was here in California or if it was in Texas or someplace. There was a guy that he was having a barbecue or a party or something, and he went into a barn, and he found somebody assaulting his like toddler child, and he beat the guy to death, and he was not convicted. He was not even actually tried for it. They let him off.
right.
So he actually, I mean, even though in theory he should have just stopped the act and not killed the person, he beat the person to death, and he was found like not responsible because of that. That's a crime of passion, but he didn't dissect the person's body like you said. Now here's two quick things I wanted to bring up as we close this. So one thing is, there is an interesting scenario. There are some people that have they're not necessarily psychopaths or sociopaths. There is a form of mental illness where you feel so bad about letting someone down that you would actually rather kill them than disappoint them or have something. It's really strange. It's
I've
really
heard about this, yeah.
You've heard about this, right? We're
Yeah.
like you're so worried that something bad is going to happen to them that you would rather kill them so that the bad thing doesn't happen.
There
You know
was
what I mean?
this case, I cannot name you the man who did the killing, but there was this really, I guess, religious guy who had, I believe, 3 kids and a wife. We should definitely cover this case. I can't tell you the name, but he actually killed his whole family because he lost his job and he could not provide for their family anymore. And he was like a really, like a higher up in the corporate world. He was like a really high, I guess, worker for like a local bank. He was earning a lot of money, and then he actually got fired from his job. So for like 2 months he was pretending to go to work, just driving the kids off to school and then driving around the city for the whole day, and then the money actually ran out, and then he killed his whole family and then fled. So yeah, these things actually happen. Yeah.
Yeah, even I think some of the postpartum murders where mothers suddenly murder like all their kids. Sometimes those are a version of that, where they're so worried about the children and about their future and about being a bad mother that they would almost rather kind of it almost feels like they're trying to preserve them in that state and not have bad things happen to them in the future. But of course,
I don't think Scott was like
no,
that.
no. So that's not him. So the other thing I wanted to call out, this was actually something that I even woke up this morning thinking about this. It disturbed me so much that when I read about it, and there he is now, older, a couple decades in prison now, almost.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing was about his mother. So maybe this has something to do with either something that runs in the family or some aspect of his environment that may have conditioned him to have kind of a lack of attachment to family life. So here was the really weird thing. His mother, his maternal grandfather, his mother's father, was murdered. I couldn't get a lot of detail about the case. I guess if I wanted to buy one of the books and read it, maybe I'd have more info. But his mother's father was murdered when his mother was like a little girl. So something happened. I don't know if it was a business dispute or something, but he was killed with like a metal pipe for like $600, which back then was a lot of money. It was like in the 40s.
Like a hit?
I'm not sure if it was a hit or like a robbery, or it was some kind of something where, for what seems like a little bit of amount of money, for like what was probably $5,000 now. Back then it was $600. So he was killed, and then her mother, so his mother's mother, apparently had a breakdown, or for whatever reason was so unable to cope with raising a child alone that she gave up his mother.
Yeah.
She put his mother in an orphanage and never took care of her again. And her mother was in an orphanage that apparently was pretty notorious for, bad stuff going on. So like, some kind of abuse.
We know what you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, so then which can often when someone is in an environment of abuse like that conditions them to be taken advantage of by other people. You know what I mean? It's almost, I heard something a long time ago that we learn to be abused. Something like we learn to be abused by those we love. Like it isn't our enemies that teach us how to be abused. It's those that we trust and love teach us like kind of how to be abused or mishandled. So
makes sense.
Anyway, his mother somehow had like 2 other children with I'm not sure if it's one other man or 2 other men that she then gave up for adoption before she had Scott. So before she married the man that was Scott's father and had Scott and kept him, right? So that blew me away because so not only did she,
like this is the first time I'm hearing these details, and it's
disturbing, right? Like what the hell's going on? So she was essentially thrown away by her mother after her father died, and then given up. I mean, which is just devastating to a child. It's not like you're giving a child up to a loving family, which it sounds like she at least did that with her children. It does sound like she gave up her children to other loving families who like those children were at least, I think, had positive things to say about their upbringing. So maybe in this case it worked out better for them, but it's still kind of a disturbing thing to think about. So it's almost like it makes you wonder if he ever felt anything subconsciously like, oh, I'd better. I don't know. It makes you wonder if there's some kind of like weird family psychological issue about a lack of attachment to family members and to having a family, and you know what I mean.
That's very interesting. That's you've brought up like an insanely good point actually, because I did not come across these details, and these are really interesting details. I've heard that we sort of get like some sort of preconceptions brought down from like our generations, like so we could be like affected by, I don't know, our ancestors like trying to hunt for like mammoth, you know what I'm saying, and those traits could like sort of still be in us, like for say like one of my ancestors did, had like a shocking experience with like a wild cat, and for say now I would be afraid of cats, you know what I'm saying, like even domestic ones. So like it could be something that just psychologically was brought down to him from essentially the trauma that his own mother felt, and he could have felt like that because seriously, why else would he why would he do this, to start a new life with that masseuse Amy, what's her name? Amy? I forgot.
Amber.
Amber. So to start a new life with Amber, I'm not sure like what got into him, but yeah, he did some messed up stuff. Like that's a good way to put it, right?
Yeah, he ended up on a path that I guess he felt like he couldn't get out of, and unfortunately maybe he was just getting married too young and having a family too young, and not maybe having issues that he'd never gotten through, and
right. So
no one's life's perfect, but
right. I was going to ask you, as we close this episode, do you think he's gonna get actually executed, or what does his future legally look like?
Yeah, I think just politically, a lot of things would have to change in the state. The state overwhelmingly elects people from the party that tends to restrict the death penalty and enforcement of it. And even recently, the past 10 years, we've had notorious murders like that were on death row at one point. The Night Stalker, he died of, I think, lymphoma or something, and then Manson, whose death penalty was overturned and never reinstated, he died of old age. So
if the Night Stalker and Manson didn't get executed, I don't think Scott is getting executed.
Yeah, no. So he's just gonna live not a great life either over there in San Quentin, and that's it's sad for everybody. It's really unfortunate. It's almost it's just too bad. He was too much of a coward to, just get divorced and have that awful breakup and let people down. Instead, he let way more people down, and ruined a lot of people's lives.
Yeah. So this was episode 29, guys. Thank you for watching this episode. Thank you for listening. Any last closing, I guess, things you wanted to say before we sign off, Glenn?
No, I guess I've said a mouthful. Thank you for listening. Please don't forget to hit subscribe and catch us for our next episode.
Catch us on our next episode. And guys, stay safe and peace out.